Hey guys, it's been a while since I've done videos like this that I'm talking while painting over, but today I just wanted to talk about art block and my thoughts. This is not a scripted video, it's just a video of me talking about some random topic because I've been going through this period myself. I've been going through this time myself, and I just feel like I needed to say something because for the past several months I've not been in the mood for painting or drawing, and I've been stuck in this idea of I need to get the perfect gear and a better laptop or better camera to record my sketches. But the one common theme that I can speak to in this time that I've been very unproductive in my art journey is basically art block, like the feeling like you've plateaued. And I've tried to come up with a simple method to help me push forward, because in my time during this art block I noticed for one thing, it's just a feeling of not progressing. When I think of art block, it's just a phase that I have to go through. It's like I have these like three parts in my progress. I have the ascent, and then I have the plateau, and then I have the descent, and just a combination of those makes up my progress. So most times when I feel like I'm progressing, it's the ascent, right? And when I'm feeling like I'm going backwards, it's the descent. But then in between that is a plateau, and that plateau is where I feel like I'm going nowhere. It's like I'm doing one thing over and over again, and it just feels mundane. And that's when I tend to fall into an art block. And I think for most artists this is the same. We experience these points of not progressing, and again we are not moving backwards, but the things we are doing have become so easy and so mundane. It's like if you're trying to paint and the painting you're making doesn't challenge you anymore, and it just doesn't feel like it's worth your time, you can tend to get into those periods of art block. And also sometimes there are points where you have a creative block, just when you aren't creative at all. It's just, it happens. And this period, this can go on for weeks or months, and in my case it's been on for months, and I've been struggling to paint. So I came up with a few methods that I thought would help for any of you that feels like they need to move past this. I came up with a few methods that I think can be very, very helpful in your journey. And the first one is to reevaluate why you're doing what you're doing. For me, painting means a lot to me. It helps me understand human emotions. I know that's a very strange thing to say, but if you've observed the paintings that I make, including this one, they aren't portraits that are staged with proper lighting and defined forms like most artists would recommend. Those portraits and those kind of reference studies are very good, and I always use them for reference to learn about the fundamentals of art, but I rarely post them because they don't mean anything to me. They're just study pieces. But then these paintings like this one, which have an emotion, it can be and for my emotions I pick them from several places, so there can be emotions of anger, sadness, happiness, whatever, and all the varying emotions in between. They are the ones that I always look for. It's like the moments when someone is authentically themselves, not a staged persona. It's like I always look for those. So for me, this is what is meaningful to me. And however much I'm in an art block, I can always refer back to this, and it can give me an inspiration to paint, because each person can represent the same emotion differently. I mean, like if 5 people are laughing, they would be laughing, right? Yeah, but the detail within, like, their facial structures, when they're laughing, when they're smiling, those details are different. It's generally a smile or a laugh or a cry, but they are all represented differently from each individual. So for me, I love that. I love capturing those emotions. When it comes to sketching or painting landscapes, I always look for landscapes with very dramatic lighting. Probably I like moving towards fantasy like paintings, and then I add a realistic nature to them, and those also carry an emotion of their own. So when you're in an art block, sometimes you can think about reaching for those indicators of your own, like your own motivations for doing the painting or the work that you do as an artist. Again, for me, it is my emotion, and the emotions, the desire I have to capture these emotions. And for another person, it can be something different. It can be perspective or value, lighting, whatever, or the story itself. I haven't learned how to work with story, that I'll be honest. And the paintings that I've tried to do that capture a story of very many individuals, those paintings have always lagged behind and haven't been able to complete probably any of them, because I love looking at emotions of people, and as of now, that is what gives me more joy in doing what I do. And then after, because sometimes when I feel like I've painted an emotion and I'm happy about the result of the painting, then I can move on to taking on something more challenging and something that is out of my area of interest. Okay, so in art you can always try to look for things you care about when you're in an art block, just to give you the initial momentum. It can be very, very, very helpful. And then again, when you're in an art block, it is not like I don't, unless when you're in an art block, you can also consider going for a rest, because unless you're working on a tight deadline and you're working in a studio and you have these deadlines coming up, sure, you can go ahead and do the work that you're supposed to be doing so that you meet your client's deadlines. But if you're doing personal work and you're in an art block, sometimes the best option to take is to take a rest, because in most cases these rests are fuel in them. in within themselves, right? In that, for example, there are times that I've taken rests, not just in art, but in several areas, other things that I do, like playing music or playing basketball. And when I return, I return with a lot more enthusiasm, and probably I show up better, in that I even acquire skills within that time that I'm resting. I recently did a painting, it wasn't actually a painting, it was a charcoal drawing of a friend of mine, and I hadn't drawn in like 3 months. I hadn't touched my pencils or charcoal or anything, because I just couldn't. And then I just picked up the charcoal and started drawing, and then I made this painting, this sketch, and it was so realistic, in that it was 10 times more realistic than I had ever drawn this person ever. And even today, that as I'm recording this sketch isn't finished yet, but once it's finished, I'll post it on my Instagram. But this sketch just made it just continued to confirm this idea that sometimes art blocks require rest. You need to put a rest on your creative energies, because once you come back, in most cases you're going to come back much better. That's if you take a rest for the sake of taking a rest, not giving up. So for me, for example, when I take rests, my mind doesn't stop thinking about the art that I'm creating, and then the challenges that I faced in the past while I was drawing those things. It's like I try to think about the challenges I had passively, of course. I don't brainstorm or do anything. I just randomly think about it. Or when I'm moving around, I observe people's faces, I observe their facial structures, because that in itself builds up my visual library. And when I'm drawing, my brain has a lot more information, because we know that generally we human beings, our brains are very good at simplifying things. So once you can see a face that is oval, but then your face won't know the dimensions. Your brain won't know the dimensions consciously, because it will simplify those dimensions into simpler details. It will make them into simpler details that it will be able to congest. So which means that if you are operating from such a visual library, you might not know what to look for in your drawings, in your sketches. And so an art block can help you to reevaluate and to revisit those areas, just passively observing. If, for example, you're drawing a still life of a plant, and you're drawing, let's say, the stem of a tree, it's not just a rectangle or a cylinder. It is a combination of those shapes, and then several other things like texture and a lot of other random variables that you can use. So passively observing will give you a better visual library, and so that by the time you go back to your work and you gain your creative energy back, you will be much more equipped with the information you need to produce much better work out of a creative block, right? So creative blocks aren't so bad. There are very many other techniques that I've been working with, but some haven't been very effective, so I don't feel like talking about them right now. But I feel like you should try these two for now, and if you're in an art block, just think about why you're doing the art you're doing and what excites you most, and then try to go for that, because an art block may signify that you're moving away from that. And I don't know, it's like some people question whether that is a professional thing to do or not. But again, for example, if you're doing art as a hobby, or if you're a hobbyist and you're experiencing an art block, then this could mean that you revisit that. It could be very, very helpful. All right. And again, if you are not a hobbyist and you experience an art block, then that is something harder to explain how you can go about that. But I'm sure that there are ways you can move past that, maybe through pushing yourself or finding faster recovery methods. For example, I know that when I do freelance projects that require me to do work that I don't really like, I constantly have to push myself through, and that means a lot of rest and a lot and very short periods of really high focus. Like, for example, if I'm making a commissioned portrait of something that I don't really care about, or someone some emotion that I don't really care about, and not something, but some emotion that I don't really find interesting, or a subject that I don't really find interesting, that may produce a hindrance in my journey. So in that time, the method that I've considered using is making sure that I take as much rest as I can, and then when I sit down to focus on the work that I'm doing, I give it my utmost focus. All right, as much focus as I can, because for a short time. So maybe, for example, I can sit and sketch for 4 hours plus. But if I'm doing that kind of work, I may sit for 2 hours. All right, and so that will help me. That can help me get through these paintings in time, and then deliver them to the clients well in time before the deadlines. Right? So you can also try doing that if you're a professional and you're experiencing an art block. But another thing you shouldn't forget that I talked about, another thing that you shouldn't forget that I talked about is the importance of rest. Take the rest you need, and during that rest, build up your visual library through observation. Don't paint, just observe, and use that time to inspire you to paint more or to draw more, because at the end of the day, you need rest to revitalize your systems, your creative energy. So if you find yourself in an art block, a rest may be very necessary. It may be a few days, or in my case it was a few months, but I still got through it painfully. But I now have a much better understanding of what I am drawing and why I'm drawing it, and how I'm supposed to draw it, and that's why I'm more excited to draw in future. All right, so this is going to be all for today. I'm going to stop here. I'm making at least one video per week. I'm going to make sure that I start posting more regularly, at least a video per week, and I hope to see you then.